So I'll get us started because we're right on the nose. My name's Simone Lilly. I am the Director of Community Investments with End Homelessness St. John's, and I'm your moderator for today's session. This session is called the Housing First Network Community of Interest, and I'm really pleased to welcome you here. We're in the city of Halifax, which is situated in the Mi'kma'ki, which is the ancestral and traditional lands of the Mi'kmaq people. And today I'm pleased to join our two presenters, Tim Aubry with the University of Ottawa, as well as Jeffrey Nelson, who's with the Wilfrid Laurier University. And their bios should be located, I think, on the app as well as on the website, so if you do want more information. And just a little bit of a description for today, which I've been told to share with you. Launched in June 2022, the Canadian Housing First Network Community of Interest was developed as a community of practice of CAMH in Ontario and allied network of CAEH. The goal of the CHFN-COI, which is Canadian Housing First Network Community of Interest, is to build capacity and assist with program development and improvement of Housing First programs across Canada. First part of this session, we'll introduce the CHFN-COI and present the results of a survey conducted earlier in 2023 on Canadian Housing First programs, including information on their location, population served, size, and program characteristics. The second part of the session will be interactive and focus on soliciting feedback from participants on how the CHFN-COI can assist in improving and growing Housing First in Canada. So I'm going to pass it over to our presenters. Thanks so much.
Okay. So we want to do a land acknowledgement for starters. We'd like to acknowledge we're in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional territory of the Mi'kmaq people. Just a little bit of an overview. So we're going to give a little bit of overview, purpose of the network. If there are steering committee members here, we'll introduce them while Simone is on the steering committee. And then we're going to have a description. Tim's going to do a description of a survey of Housing First programs across Canada that we did. We want to get some input from you about a webinar series that we have been doing and get your ideas for that. We're going to briefly talk about a fidelity exchange and interest in this whole issue of fidelity. And then we're going to ask what the network could do for you and what you'd be willing to contribute to the network. So that's our plan for today. I hope that sounds okay. Do you want me to do this?
Yeah.
Okay. So our purpose is to assist communities across Canada to develop, evaluate, and improve Housing First programs based on the Pathways model. So Tim and I were both researchers, along with Stephen Wong here, and I think that's all of the people in the room who looked at Housing First and tested that model. Thank you. We have been interested in taking those data and helping Canada to scale up Housing First from those 5 communities to across the country. And we have had we did have a dissemination project immediately on the heels of HF6, but our network is a continuing effort to expand Housing First. So building local capacity, promoting high quality implementation and implementation that's faithful to the model, promoting continuous improvement, and advocating for Housing First. Our steering committee, we have people from across the country here. Is there anyone besides Simone on the steering committee who is present? Yes. Can you say who you are?
Kendra Giles from Regina.
Thanks, Kendra. Good to meet you. We haven't met yet. Yeah. Nice to meet you. And Catherine, go ahead.
Catherine Gibb from Hillary.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, it's okay. So we have, and Stephen, you're on the committee too.
Yes.
Yeah. Say who you are. Steve Wong, Toronto. Okay, very modest man. We have people from all over Canada, from BC across to Atlantic provinces. I guess Simone, you're probably the furthest one.
Yeah.
Okay. Um, okay. So Tim's gonna talk about this survey.
Yeah, um, let me start though by saying is this idea of a community of interest is a resource. Like it's kind of organic, quite frankly. Although Jeff went through some objectives, and the past year, calendar year, I've been on a sabbatical, and I went over to the UK and went to a conference on housing first in Glasgow in Scotland, and there was a meeting of all these networks, which had kind of evolved and developed in a whole bunch of European countries. So what we've done since then is connected to that network. So we're part of that larger international network. They have a much better resource than we are, but that's okay. But the idea really, because it's an approach, it's evidence based, it has a set of values, a set of principles. How can we, with the folks from across the country that are part of this network, help grow housing first across the country, and also help programs that are out there doing the work evolve, adapt, get better. So that's really, and obviously, we come from a research background, so we also want to stay on top of what's going on in that world. There's all sorts of research going on internationally that we want to bring to our programs in Canada. So when we got started with the COI went national, Jeff said, we were in Ontario for a number of years, and we would do an annual forum, and we had a webinar series then. And but when we went national, because there was nothing like it across Canada, we thought, oh, one of the first things we should do is try to figure out how many programs are out there, and where are they, and when did they start, and what characterizes those programs. So we did a survey. And this went on for quite a while because we really wanted to try to get as many programs as possible. It was an online survey, but we had our folks out in the field, our people on the steering committee, and we also had Eric McNaughton helped us out with this in a big way, who's out in BC, who was involved with that Home Chez Soi, identify programs that we could contact for the survey. So we've tried to be, as thorough as possible. Of course, this inventory of programs is also our mailing list for the network, so that's important. Um, I'll get to kind of how we defined to figure out whether something was housing first or not, but we wanted to look at obviously rent supplements, the nature of the support, a little bit about the history I mentioned, how big were these programs, and the extent they followed these core principles that make up housing first. So through our contacts, we landed on 132 programs. We didn't know about a lot of these programs, by the way. And the other thing I'm going to say is this is not the full population that's out there. We know that already because you'll be coming to this conference, sitting in sessions, and we hear about other programs and so on. We go, are they on the list? No, I don't think they got a survey and so on. But this is just the nature of the beast. But I think we've got a decent picture around some of the things about these programs. So we did pretty good, really appreciate it. And I know there's people in this room that responded to the survey. Thank you, thank you. We got about 3/4 of the programs that we um, contacted who responded to the survey. Now, we had a very simple definition of housing first. Jeff said we're following the pathways model, yes, but in their responses, if a program said we have rent supplements and we have some kind of support, obviously it could be ACT, assertive community treatment, it could be intensive case management, or even other forms of support. I mean, a housing-based case management is a common form of support of our Housing First programs. So that way, we kind of whittled down to having 62 programs that clearly said in the survey, we've got rent supplements. Doesn't matter whether we can cover all the clients. We still counted them if they had rent supplements, and the rent supplements were portable. That was the other thing. And they had some form of support. Okay, we heard it was a very good talk, by the way, by Jeff Olivet that at lunch about the issue which we know about, we hear about housing first being defined in situations where people are only getting housing, they're not getting support. That's an issue as well. So that's what we're looking at here when I walk you through the results. So first thing, type of support. Okay. The programs in large numbers said they delivered ICM, intensive case management. You can see here there is, though, 15 programs, which was more than we thought it was the case across Canada. We're delivering assertive community treatment of the 62. And then there were 3 others. Okay. Now, I've got to say here, one of the things that the numbers add up to more than 62. So we had to look into that. And what we get from that is that some of the programs, they responded and said they offered both. Okay. Now, some of them might be a hybrid. Okay. Or some of the programs may have more than one, what they consider a program. They might have, whether you call them teams or programs or whatever. Okay. Now, this is an issue in the Housing First world, the small number of ACT programs that are tied to housing. Okay. We've written an evidence brief on this. We've tried to get in Ontario, which has over 80 assertive community treatment programs. We have tried to really get more uptake of the ACT programs, because the ACT is the wraparound service. But it still hasn't evolved from being a support for people leaving hospital to being a support for people leaving homelessness. Okay. Okay, so you can see by size what the numbers say. There's kind of a mix, but we've got about half of them. Is about half? Yeah, it's about half have less than 100 people in them. And then the others, the other half are kind of more or less above 100. So they're not big programs by any means. That's certainly the case. And you'll see in terms of the history of them. And now some of them will have said they've had growth, which is a good thing, and recent growth. And then looking by provinces, good news was that, and I really appreciate the colleagues in Quebec, that there has been growth in Housing First. Est-ce qu'il y a quelqu'un du Québec ici? Oui. La stabilité résidentielle avec accompagnement. Je sais que c'est ça que vous appelez ça, hein, le SRA. Alors, eux, ils ont participé. So these are new programs that have really just come on stream, really in the past year, I think. Otherwise, you can see Ontario leads the way, and then there's a smattering of programs in the other provinces. Now, keep in mind, we didn't get all the programs, but I think this gives you the trends in relation to location by province. Okay. This is important. When did these programs originate? Okay. So this is tied to federal government policy. This is our interpretation of it. Jeff may have some things to say about it as well, but certainly there's early adopters, and we heard that when we started the at-home chez soi program, which, by the way, the actual start of that demonstration project was 2008 planning. It started collecting data in 2009, and then the follow-ups went to 2015. But you can see there were some early adopters, 2008 and before. These programs obviously included, in 2008 to 2013, the at-home demonstration project that have continued. A number of the projects have continued from the different sites. And then you can see, and this were the year where the scaling up happened. Okay. The history, in terms of the federal homelessness initiative, is that I believe it was 2014, correct me if I'm wrong, the homelessness partnering strategies, HPS, mandated communities to spend, the big 10 cities, 10 Canadian cities, had to spend 2/3 of the federal funds on Housing First. The other communities, I think there were maybe 51 other communities, small, medium-sized cities, they had to spend 1/3. I think it was 35%. So you can see where the growth comes from. That was federal policy. The National Housing Strategy came out in 2017. And if you do a word search of the National Housing Strategy, okay, it's on the web, you won't find the term Housing First in any of that document, okay? And what happened was Reaching Home came in, I think it was 2018, and the mandated resourcing of Housing First programs ended in 2019. So that's an important part of the policy landscape that played into what we're seeing here. And then you can see after, it's a small number of new programs, 2019 and on. Okay. So then, just looking at characteristics, you can see, and 62 is the magic number, by the way. Certainly all of the programs that were Housing First said they were recovery-based. That's not going to surprise you. All of them put heavy emphasis on community integration. That's not going to surprise you. There was a mix here, although, more programs said they gave immediate access. to permanent housing without preconditions. It's unclear to us how that got interpreted, why there's 18 of the 62 who are saying, well, there could be, and it could be a delay, and they've had to move people into other form of housing. We also heard from some programs, they explained it, that they did do an assessment at the beginning. And there were some people, and especially if they had other housing available, that they would route towards other housing, particularly single site housing. Otherwise, again, interpreting some of this stuff, housing that for as long as needed. Most of the programs, they're defined as permanent housing. I don't know, Jeff, if you have thoughts about the six that said they weren't providing housing as long as needed. Whether they're talking about a graduation process, because that does go on in Housing First programs, what they call moving on. Um, uh, you can see here program growth. So that was good news. And you would expect in the situation we're in, there would be program growth or opportunities for program growth. Of course, notwithstanding the real pressure for these programs to find affordable housing for their clients. But you can see that, 2/3 of them say they've had program growth. And then interestingly enough, when we talk about fidelity assessment, and CAEH has done a lot of work in this area, 2/3 said they had a fidelity assessment conducted. It looks like our best estimate, by the way, based on, and this is an estimate, is there's probably 100 Housing First programs out there. There's some youth ones we heard about, but there weren't a lot. There might have been 7, I think, that Stephen Gates has put together. And then certainly there's some other programs. There's one in Yellowknife we didn't know about that we heard about, and so on. So think about it, 100. Now, the last PIT count, if you look at national numbers, they came out with a summary recently. 32,000 people that they identified as homeless in a 24-hour period between 2020, the PIT counts were done in 2022. The actual number didn't change from before the pandemic. I think it was 2018 maybe, or 2018 or 2019. It was still 32,000, but the percentage of chronic homelessness went up. That's not going to surprise anybody in this room. And it was now up to 70% of the 32,000. So you're looking at over 20,000 people. I think what it tells us in terms of Housing First, and this is an estimate, is that we probably need to triple the number of Housing First programs across the country. Instead of having 100, we probably need 300. And that's a ballpark figure, and I'd be interested in your reactions to that. So that's a quick walk through the survey results. Thank you very much, those of you in the room that did it. It provided us with a mailing list, so we're going to keep in touch with these programs, but we're continuing to add to the mailing list. And I'll say, if there's anybody here that doesn't know about their organization having done the survey, and they want to be on our mailing list, and we're not going to, you're not going to get sales pitches or anything, but if you want to hear about webinars and you want to keep in touch with us, I'd ask you at the end to come and just give us your name and organization and email. Okay, so we'll move on now and talk about the webinars. Jeff, do you want to
take any questions, Tim?
Yeah, maybe take questions first that's a good idea about the survey. Anything, your reactions, or anything surprise you in terms of the findings? Does the number kind of make sense when you think of your own communities? Yeah. Stephen?
I'm just curious about the inclusion in terms of because our organization.
Microphone, please. Hang on. The our tech guides.
Oh, because yes, okay, because yeah, we need it for the interpretation.
Hang on.
And
Here we go for the interpretation.
Sorry. I'm just wondering about the inclusion. So our organization, based on reaching home criteria, would not actually qualify for any funding, but we're providing permanent supportive housing.
Yeah.
And I'm just curious about longer term vision around inclusion into the network.
oh, we will include anybody into the network. We're we're not the more the merrier. But we I guess the for the survey, and we were particularly interested in the pathways model, the application of it. And we know it's not, 100%. There's all sorts of adaptations. And like I said, it was rent supplements that are portable and forms of support. It does exclude, like in the survey, um, programs that are single site and that have on-site support. I'm not suggesting we don't need those programs. In fact, I think we need to figure out what the balance should be between the two. And obviously, you want to maximize choice out there. But certainly, in terms of being in the network, accessing the resources, and so on, we're we're open. We're wide open. Okay.
And then you'll get mailings and mailings and notifications. I wonder if people could move up more. We have a small group. Would it be possible for people to move up, like if you're in some of the back rows there? Pardon me? Oh,
The microphone for translation.
okay,
Okay.
got it.
See, it's been a while since Jeff's been in a classroom because if you ask students to move up in a classroom, you're going to wait a long time.
Okay. Any other questions about the survey? So that's thanks for your attention to that. That's our best effort right now, but we hope to be able to add to the list and learn more about additional Housing First programs because I think, as Tim said, there's probably another 40, 50 out there, and we'd like to hear about them. I'm going to move, though, quickly into something where we're going to get some input from you. Is our network. And previously, when we were just an Ontario network, we held an annual webinar series. So we do about, I don't know, maybe 4 a year,
4
something
years.
like that.
Yep.
And you could see a list up there in the table of some of the topics that we've covered. Like our first one was on rent assistance. There's a whole range of topics. We use our steering committee members and things that we hear to decide what the webinar topic will be. And we've actually gotten some good ideas from attending the conference yesterday and today as to future webinar topics. Maybe I'll just say one thing. All of these are passed except the one on scatter site versus single site is coming up. And you're welcome to participate in that. I mean, these are free. And it's that one's on November 22nd. It's on 10 a.m. Eastern time. So 11 a.m. Halifax time. If you're interested in participating, just give us your address, and we'll make sure that you get notification of that, and you get the link, and you can sign up. But what we'd like to do now is just ask. Yeah, go ahead.
Let me just say something about the webinars because we really get good attendance. We've had over 300 people at these webinars because they're international. In 2021, we connected or partnered with the Europe Housing First Hub on an international series of webinars. And so we've done this. This is the second year. And I mean, it's just the virtual world, eh? You just reach out to so many people out there. So you can see the topics with them. I mean, we looked at housing first in women, housing first influencing policy, kind of the whole systemic issue around housing first, the 10 to 20% of people in housing first that have difficulty, that aren't able to necessarily find stable housing, the criminal justice system and housing first, data collection, housing first in youth, and then the one coming up, the scatter site. So it gives you an idea of the kind of topics that we've put together.
And these are all topics that come, like I say, from people who are working in the field, and they'd like to have some education about that. The other thing is, besides the fact that we partner with the European Housing First Hub, is in most of the webinars, we have about half the presenters who are European and half who are North American. So it's a really good mix, and there's a good mix of people who are on the webinars. But we do get a good attendance of these, and we'd really like to hear what your ideas are. If there are particular topics that would be important for you to learn more about in terms of housing first. So I'm just going to open it up for a few minutes, and we'll take some notes on this and see if you have some thoughts. Do I have to pass the mic?
Are we going to project the notes?
Want to do the notes? Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah.
Okay. So
So here.
we have our note taker, Victoria,
Victoria.
because she knows how this machine works better than I do.
Where do you want me to write them? Here, or do you want me to
I
write
think-
So next year we're already. We come up with an idea. Just slide it.
Do you want to do that?
Or it could be this.
I could do. We were on this slide. Duplicate slide.
Slide down.
There you go. Not just a pretty face. Oops. Oh. And then you could do it like this, maybe bullet points. All right.
Good. So Victoria will put them right in as we hear them. This is like.
You just need to make sure that you get off this computer because the slide
You're
got
right.
stuck.
You're right. And I have the key.
There you go.
Numbers are fine. Those were the numbers. We had to put in the percentages.
It's okay. The
Said-
idea was that.
Yeah. Said them. Okay. Good. Oh, that's great.
Sounds interesting. Scattered site versus.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. No, and these are good. These are like Joey is from the guy in California. He's a college yeah, you'll see. You might run into a subject you look at, and that's probably not. Yeah.
Okay, we're gonna just take your ideas. So we'll just go around really quickly. Do you have est-ce que tu as des idées pour un webinar? No, okay. Anybody, anyone else have some ideas? Yeah, go ahead.
I think I don't think my phone. I'll get y'all that.
Hi, we just had a discussion. I'm an avid supporter of housing first approach, but I feel that we're using these terms in working with people who are homeless. Unfortunately, a lot of people don't actually understand what the approach is, right? Or where it originates or how it works. And I feel like just from our conversation, I've attended webinars where we've had the opportunities to hear from different cities and different countries on how it actually works in practice, what works, what troubles they've encountered. And I feel increasing access of Canadian service providers, not just the ones who deal with housing, but for instance, like I run a drop-in program from people experiencing homelessness, and it's still essential for me to understand this. It's also essential for us to understand what the approach is so we could hold our municipalities accountable when they claim they're doing this approach and they're not actually doing it.
The what? Yes, yes. Yeah, no, Jeff's passing around a document that's what is housing first? This is kind of the network kind of summary of uh, of housing first, and it talks about the theory, but it also summarizes some of the key research on 2 pages.
Um, I guess so. I come from rural Ontario, and kind of touching on that with the funding models that's in Ontario, our municipalities get the funding, and so then our municipalities have to do, or don't have to, but they tend to do the housing first programs. So I would be interested in seeing housing first specifically for municipalities and how what that work should look like and how they should be working with other organizations and those wraparound services. Um, yeah.
Smaller ones?
Yeah.
Ellie?
So hi.
Hey, Ellie.
Hi.
Good to
Uh,
come.
Thanks. Yeah. So where we are, it's our municipality is who run. We have no shelter programs. We only have a youth organization that does housing first. We have no adult programs that do housing first. But our municipality, keeps funding for themselves and says that they do housing first, but they actually offer no outreach programming. So, specific housing first training for municipalities. And I think, not to put the burden on them because they don't receive that well, but, ways in which they can utilize agencies and, support so that they can provide an outreach service.
Yeah, education of like local funders and regional governments and things like that around what really is housing first. I think that's what you were saying too. That's a good one. Other ideas? Yeah, from options. Yeah. Okay.
Just one second. We had a question here, and then I'm going to come to you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, maybe some information on case management. I know that we have, we broker our services to
Yeah.
community agencies, and having been a part of the at home CHFN-COI and having seen the clinical and all that case management with the clientele that we work with, I think that would be of interest in terms of best practices and
Yeah, models of case management, eh? Because from New Brunswick, and you've mentioned this when you and I have spoken here, you've got the FACT model, eh? The flexible assertive community treatment. There's some of that in other provinces, but it's an
and
interesting model.
and also maybe I don't know, you may have touched on fidelity prior, but fidelity is a big deal too because we have the FACT model, but
Yes.
according to my understanding, fidelity is not being really looked at.
Yeah, it has its own fidelity.
So that's another, if we don't have that accountability of how the work's to be done, it's really difficult to measure the work.
Right on, brother.
This is
So we were chatting, and I'd personally like to see more flushing out of the community integration piece. So what that looks like, whether like we're going to be doing pass and maps training with our whole team, and we're mapping out communities when we move in with people, just flushing that out more so everyone's doing that consistently across the board, and then.
Oh, yeah.
So I kind of follow what she was saying, but I have noticed a lot of boredom with clients and just that they have nothing to go to. And I don't say that because St. John definitely does have a lot of great things to go to, but it's more from a clinical side that they don't want to go to the mental health facility. They don't want to have to, go into certain clinics and certain offices and different things like that. So just kind of, yeah, the more integration and less structured, I guess, supports and resources and that sort of thing.
community participation that
Yeah.
way. Yeah, so we're doing just for your information, we're doing a small pilot in Ottawa with Options by Town. Thankfully, and it's nice working with Options and CMHA Ottawa to try to test this social prescribing idea in the context of housing first. People know what social prescribing is from the UK, eh? But it hasn't been applied very much. In fact, it hasn't been applied yet in Canada in mental health services. There was a pilot though in Ontario in the community health centers, but it was for seniors. So that could be, one idea. But I'm sure there's other programs we could tap into that might be doing some interesting stuff, around community participation. So okay.
And not my question, but just responding to that, Dr. Andrew Buzari in Toronto works for UHN, and he's running a social medicine model.
Oh yeah.
There's a new development, 51 modular housing units that's using an RGI and a housing first
Interesting.
model. But my comment was, or my thought was for a webinar, is really thinking about the costing of the model. It's quite expensive for social housing providers to implement. And I'm from Toronto, I run supportive housing, and our folks that we're using are getting from the city of Toronto, we're using RGI supplements from the city, municipality, and then asked to be provided or required to do a housing first model. It's quite expensive. We're dealing with extreme hoarding. We're dealing with folks' units being taken over, regardless of the amount of security and wraparound supports. It takes time to help people engage in recovery and engage in trusting
Absolutely.
organizations. And using an 80% AMR model with our funders, I think our funders need to be educated that we need flexible funding to allocate that funding elsewhere to rectify some of these hoarding issues, like the more expensive
Right.
challenges. And the
Yeah.
funder doesn't see that at all. They like cut us off at 80% AMR, even if there's like funds left. It's just ridiculous. So we're having a real struggle trying to implement it and do it right because we believe in it with the current funding model.
Right. Right. If I could just mention something about the cost, because I think a webinar on the economics, of housing first. Did we do that, Jeff, at some point? I can't remember. But we have Eric Latimer from McGill, did some really good work in this area, and he's very well known in community mental health circles. But he costed with ACT, Housing First with ACT, and this would be, by the way, now in 2023 dollars, because I converted it recently. It's about between 23 and 24,000 per person per year. Okay, with intensive case management, again, 2023 dollars. It's between 17 and 18,000 per person per year. But the other part of the story is there's a cost offset. There's a reduction in use of services. It doesn't offset all of it. It's not, but it offsets, like for people with highest level of needs, almost 70% of the cost of the program. And for people with moderate level of needs with the ICM, it's about half. So that's part of the story. But I think getting that kind of stuff out again is probably important.
Yeah, I can't remember if we did a webinar on that, but we have these little bulletins we call evidence at a glance, and we have one on cost. So anyone can access these evidence at a glance or policy briefs. They're on the website. I think that's going to be on the last slide, but you could just ask us and we'll make sure you get that. But that's it's like a 2-pager or something, and it's a good summary of the research.
My thoughts are, well, a few that are floating around. One is, and this was thanks to the work of CHFN-COI, the impact initially was mentioned yesterday about how the Fed said, okay, 50% of your reaching home dollars must now go to housing first. And in the concept of costing, so there's the financial impact of the service, but to your point, there's also necessary financial resources if you're going to do housing first effectively and appropriately.
Absolutely.
And I think that's what the study also showed. And so in Kelowna, reaching home, when it first came, all the reaching home funds that came were $600,000, and you got like 300,000 to run a housing first program.
Yeah.
So again, I think there's a policy level
Yeah.
discussion, because what happens is the evidence gets taken, and I'm going to say, then gets bastardized into something that looks very different than what
Yeah.
the actual original idea and intent was. And then the other thing you get, and this has been in our province, is that housing first becomes like a buzzword. And so all of a sudden, everybody's doing housing first. And I remember a couple of years ago when all the shelters were saying, well, we're housing first shelters. And it's like, well, that's not even possible. Right? And then in BC, they've built congregate care supportive housing, and with 2 staff, very low funded, and they've called it housing first. And I think so, as this is filtered through over the course of time, then people just go, well, this housing first thing, it just doesn't work. And I think there's a strong need to, again, educate what is housing first, how does it work, with an argument that if you're going to do it well and it's going to be effective, you need to fund it properly. And done so, it actually makes a huge difference.
Great comments.
Yeah.
And you got to get in yours too. Like
Yeah, I can use my moderator privileges to chime in.
Unbiased moderator.
And I would just echo 2 things, actually. You might have noticed that Newfoundland was not on the survey results. And we had a really big debate, actually, in our community, because we used to have a housing first, 2 housing first programs, but for cost is the exact reason why those programs got kind of morphed into something else. And now we do a completely different model, which does not fit the criteria of housing first fidelity. So as a group, we all said, nope, 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 nope. Before responding, which is interesting because we do operate from aspects of housing first, but we have to frame it that way. And then the second thing for my webinar suggestion also kind of jumps off of something that you mentioned. It's around, we really engage with the private rental market all the time. And that is a really massive struggle. And we invest a lot of our money into that. And some of the key things that we're struggling with are certainly unit takeovers as well as hoarding. And it costs a ton of money.
Just wondered about system integration of housing first models with other permanent supportive housing that might be set up to serve the mental health and addiction system, and how do you parse out a precious resource within communities?
Yeah, that systemic issue, which we heard about in a session yesterday, that we have housing first programs in Canada, but we don't have housing first systems. They're add-ons to some extent, and they compete. This is why you run into issues. They compete for the same resources as programs that were there before. So it's a it's pretty tough competition. Yeah, sorry, Rob, go for it, man.
So I'm wondering about substance use and housing first. You don't have anything specific there, and more specifically, the impact of fentanyl in housing first programs, and not just the clients, the tenancies, but also the impact on the case managers who are working in a very different world than when housing first started in Canada.
Yeah. Okay. Keep it up.
Yeah, we've been thinking about that one too. You know, not just fentanyl, but meth, and I mean, there's a whole panoply of new drugs out there that didn't exist when all the data were collected for at home. So, I just mentioned one other one that Tim and I were talking about was, you mentioned it about, like the difficulties of hoarding.
Oh yeah.
And Nick, he did his presentation yesterday, and he was talking about high risk behaviors that might lead to housing instability. And hoarding was one of the ones that was talked about as, potential issue. So is that something that would resonate with people? Is something to have something on hoarding?
Yeah, that's
Having a housing program ourselves, unfortunately, because of safety concerns, we've had to evict numerous tenants because of this issue.
yeah.
I sort of predicted it a few years ago, that this was sort of the new thing that was coming, and it's sort of coming to fruition now. So
Yeah, Catherine, you have somebody that works on hoarding, eh? And you're like specific, like a specialist, which is really something, It's
And we're actually
oh,
Sorry. I almost feel like I'm harassing folks at this point, but I begin orders.
In Ontario, there's a couple of different hoarding coalitions and networks that we're a part of to address this. And actually, I have a stellar hoarding specialist that offers frontline supports, and I'm going to take her offline for a while to do some program development and some knowledge translation on like positive or like effective ways to address hoarding situations in housing programs.
yes.
So
Yeah, so there's stuff that I know. Yeah, Options has done work in this area.
Yeah, I mean, if you needed a resource for that particular webinar, you could reach out to Joyce Lundrigan because she's been doing it for years and years, and we have a whole hoarding assistance team right now. So
Wonderful.
you could reach out to them as well for that webinar.
It's good. Any others before we?
I will take it for the next 5 years.
Yeah, they're wonderful. Our partners in Europe will be excited too.
Yeah.
Okay. So one of the things we've worked on initially through the Ontario Community of Interest on Housing First, and more recently through the Canadian Housing First Network, are what we call a fidelity exchange. Now, there might have been a few of you in the session. I know JP was there. We talked about it, and Catherine, whose agency has done this. What it is because the Housing First, the Pathways model is evidence-based. There is a set of standards, about 40. And they relate to housing, they relate to the services, they relate to the principles that are followed, like recovery, harm reduction, and so on. They relate to how the program operates. So you do an assessment of programs. And the thing is, the research, and it does tend to show this in evidence-based programs, once you kind of deconstruct them or you identify the ingredients, higher levels of fidelity give you better outcomes. Okay, so we have evidence that you follow as close as you can to the different ingredients of Housing First, you're going to get better housing stability, higher level of quality of life. even better community functioning. I mean, there's research that's shown that. So we're interested in fidelity. And you notice in the survey that 2/3 of the programs had done fidelity assessments, probably external reviews, okay, where a team comes in. And my hunch is it's, knowing what Wally Check and his team does through CAEH, it's probably the CAEH folks who've done those external reviews for the most part. But so we want to look at other methods. And one of the other methods is a peer led review. And what that means is two programs get together and agree to assess each other. So we've developed a methodology to do that. Initially, it was in person, and Jeff and Catherine's program and Pio Girolico from CMHA, Toronto, they did an exchange in person. It was down in the Toronto area. That was good. We got the pandemic. We were supposed to do one in the Ottawa area. We never got around to it. All of a sudden, we heard that Samson Barris's group were starting to do virtual fidelity assessments. So then we thought, oh, we could extend this to do an exchange virtually. So we literally just completed, before this conference, a fidelity exchange that was virtual, again, between Catherine's agency, SHIP, who've been so generous with helping develop this methodology, and a Housing First program in Galway, Ireland. Somebody asked in the session, why Ireland? I think it's because they drink Guinness beer. I wasn't, and I'm not even, I don't even know how that happened. But anyhow, it was pretty rich. It was pretty rich what happened. And, but anyhow, the virtual stuff is cheaper because you don't have the displacement. It's doable. I think that's what we found out. It's value added and beneficial. So we're interested in developing this methodology. We'll kind of write it up in a little toolkit. And we're going to partner with CAEH, the training unit. I've had a chance to talk to Wally here at the conference, and see if we can make that available to your programs if you want to do that. There'd be a little bit of a cost because you need a facilitator. So probably, Wally would have some facilitators. Just one person, though, and there's no travel costs. They don't have to, they don't have to go to your program. I guess people that are here from Housing First programs, how many of you have participated in a fidelity assessment? Okay, so there's been some people, yeah. And I guess, would you be interested in this idea of a fidelity exchange? Is that something? Because I think what we would do is just make it available as an option. It's not the only method, by the way, and I talked about in person. There is self-assessment, that programs can do. And we probably should write that up as well, that if programs want to do that on their own, they could, because that's an interesting method in itself. It's a little more biased because but you'll learn. We know that from having done those kind of assessments. Okay.
Who did your assessment, Kendra? Like the fidelity assessment? Yeah, Wally. Yeah. Okay. So raise your hand if you're interested in doing or participating in a fidelity exchange. Anybody interested? Okay. Options and Kendra. Anybody else in a Housing First program interested? Yeah, maybe. Okay. All right. Catherine, you don't get to raise your hand. You already had two.
The pioneer.
Okay.
Okay, good. Okay.
Okay. Want me to do
Yeah,
these?
yes.
Yeah. So just take a little break and I'll just talk for a minute about this slide. These are some of the other things our network has been doing. And we're going to ask you in a second what else we should be doing. But we are revising the Housing First Toolkit that was put together in 2014 at the end of At Home Chez Soi. I was part of a team that put the toolkit together that's all online and that you can access. And now it's almost 10 years out of date. So we really need to update that, and we're looking to do that this coming year. We've also had contact with provincial and federal politicians and their staff rehousing first. I would say this is a really tough one for us. We've gotten a lot of doors closed in our faces when we're trying to make inroads with politicians, but we have talked with their staff, and we really would like to do more along the lines of advocacy. Sometimes we have to resort to print media, so we've done op-eds. We've done a number of those. And then there are these materials that I was telling you about, like the cost, housing first and cost. We have a number of these policy briefs, evidence at a glance. We have the fidelity manual. We have a whole bunch of other housing first resources that we put together on our website. And Tim mentioned the fora that we've had, and we did host an international conference back in 2021. So these are some of the things that we have done and we could continue to do, but let's go to the next one.
I think it's with just to mention about the lobbying part. Because it is true, we get fobbed down to staffers. Nothing wrong with staffers, political staffers, but boy, they don't know much. I mean,
Oh,
when it comes to housing first, oh boy, there's been some brutal meetings with some of those characters, but that's okay. I mean, that's they're fresh out of school and so on. But it's the network. We do want to have some presence and kind of have contact with ministers. I mean, obviously federal ministers. Like it's quite telling. It looks like this pretty competent new housing minister yesterday. If those of you that were at lunch, he never used the two words housing first once. And the guy today from the U.S.
yeah, we had to wait for an American to come and tell us, about housing first. And he even told us about our own study.
That's right. That's right. So but it is true, eh? People, they move on. They move on. Which is kind of it's just not part of the vocabulary, or. So we have to keep a presence. I mean that's kind of the idea of the network, and certainly those of you, if you want to write an op-ed, we'll help you with it. Op-eds are good ways of getting the word out. We'll certainly, because the media, it's an important place to communicate ideas and so on. One of the people who some of you know, Gino DeStasio, he writes a lot of op-eds out of Winnipeg, um, on housing first, specifically on housing first. So
And what's the guy's Charlie's last name that we talked with back?
Charlie Gordon.
So we talked with Charlie Gordon, who he was a columnist for the Ottawa Citizen for
yeah,
years. And he
Post
said,
media.
he told us, he said, you can write these op-eds, but he says, what people are really going to is it going to resonate with them are stories. Stories about people for whom Housing First has been effective, give their testimonials. So we're thinking that this would be something that we could do. I'm trying to get my community interested in doing this and getting something in the newspaper and maybe on television. But if these are ideas that you'd like to pursue, and we can be of any assistance to you, or maybe you to us, who are doing these things, great. I think we have to get the word out better.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to just to give you a few questions again. We're not going to do groups of 4 or 5 because we'll go back to this, like talk to the person next to you. What are the burning issues in your work and housing first? How can the network support you? And how might you be willing to support the network or contribute to the network? So if you want to give you 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and Victoria we'll do one at a time. Okay.
Our intrepid.
There she goes. There she is.
Okay. Commiserate.
Question. I'm going to firm and parents are never. So if you been on state, see that's good. Now, where are you in real concerns? Alrighty, we're ready. Is there a way I could join this network and help with some of these things, like revising the tool?
Yeah, great, I'm sure.
Just trying to get more involved. I feel like I barely do everything.
Oh, sorry.
Alright,
Yeah.
I want to sing out there anymore.
No.
So I'd love to do way more.
Yeah, because we've had, it's been good. We've had students, over the years that just want to go. But, they graduate too, which we like to see.
I mean, I've got at least 3 years left. I got shared funding for 3 years or 4 years. I don't know. I'll be around for a while.
No.
And then I wouldn't stay in the fields too much here, but
Oh, yeah.
if you retire until I'm
Yeah.
What's the first question? What are your burning questions? This stuff seems to particular. I have to take it for each one. For health.
Session. Presentations by
I went to, I think they went well. I went to one on harm reduction with youth.
Oh, that's good.
And so that's what I've been doing for and as well. It was all right. They were doing supportive housing and they were calling it harm reduction based, but you need a period of stability and sobriety before you can enter. And that's why I asked. I was like, so what do you do when you have youth who don't have that, like, that issue we're seeing, they've got nowhere to go. And then they just gave me some really about how they have a spectrum of housing, but all of it, it's in Victoria and BC. Yeah. And so
No, it's. I mean, it's an interesting call. It's not a research one. So it's very technical. I mean, we're particular because we're interested in trying this with some evaluations. But what we had this morning was really kind of neat. They were we called it innovations. Now, what's the purpose? Guy was a PhD student at one of the Toronto universities, and he was looking at examples program, housing first program, seven people. It's really the housing first presentation. It was correct because I teach program evaluations, and John Dunkelbest was the moderator. I was telling him, I said, that's pretty sophisticated. No, because he knew performance management. He had a program.
oh, I hate that.
All right, gotta move it along, huh? Okay, we're gonna we're gonna wrap up here. We're just gonna get some ideas for you. Okay, if you can just bring your conversation to a close, and we'll get a few more ideas. Oh my gosh, here's a group of 4 or 5. Wow, that's incredible. That happened. Okay, what are the burning issues? What's a burning issue? On fire! Come on, what is it?
That was the worst way to bring this microphone.
Hi, I'm Jessica. I work for the YWCA in Moncton, New Brunswick. So I think where I'm hitting a brick wall is actually it's mostly the housing crisis that we're enduring. I mostly support single females or women with multiple children. We're having issues finding units. So especially two bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. Mostly the issue is we get the top up subsidy from NB Housing, so I guess they pay 30%, but it's our housing corp of the province, where they will only cover like a 2 bedroom. They will subsidize up to the $1,300 a month rent. But if you look for a 2 bedroom in Moncton right now, you're looking at $1,500 to $1,800, and
Wow.
3 bedrooms are more than that. And I think a 3 bedroom for NB Housing they'll cover it's like $1,300 or $1,400. So it's impossible. And we've been in situations where NB Housing was actually willing to give us 25 housing units to find our own private landlords to get people out of the shelters. We have contacted every single landlord possible. We have begged. We have tried, we pleaded with them. We said, we'll pay for damages. There's no inspections. But they all said no. I think we had the 25 units or 25 subsidies. We housed 3 or 4 off of that. So right now, that is where we're running into a brick wall where like I believe I have about 13 on my caseload. We could add more, but I can't. And I feel like I'm not the only agency that is doing that. I speak with multiples. I sit on a heart committee of the Greater Moncton area. It's a homeless committee, and we're all running into that. So I think that's where
Getting the rental units.
Yeah.
What's the vacancy rate at this point? Do you know?
0.01.
In Moncton.
Wow.
Oh, that's a change.
Wow. Yeah, it was over 5% back.
Okay.
So I moved back from Alberta 3 years ago. I was married and I went through a divorce, so I was forced to move back to New Brunswick. And but previous to that, my rental that I would look at was about that I lived in actually it was $1,000 a month. The same thing right now is going for $2,300, and that's a difference of 3 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. Thank you. Anyone else have a comment about the burning issues?
I can build on that and say in St. John's, it takes 3 rental subsidies that we have to cobble together for a unit. 3! And even though our rental rates would be advertised probably lower than yours, what we find is that the reality is as soon as our landlords find out that there's any complexities involved, they skyrocket it up and at least to add $600-$700. Yeah. But we're presenting tomorrow on landlord engagement strategies, so we can chat. So we can chat about that. Yeah. Anyone else?
Anyone else? What's the next question, Victoria? How can we support? What can we do? What can this network do that would help? Yeah.
That I came here with curiosity because I didn't know about first housing. So I came out of curiosity, right? And I believed like educating people and
Education.
yeah, educating about this program, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and this morning I went to the policy talk and yeah, writing to the proper doing advocacy for these programs.
Advocacy and education. Thank you. Yeah. Do you have one? That was just a twitch. Okay.
That's a big one.
I think providing tools or kind of what JP mentioned, that case management support, providing like concrete things for frontline staff that are trying to provide that supportive housing in those housing first kind of programs. I think it would be very beneficial where we all know that there is so much turnover and burnout. And so making sure that, the staff have the tools to be successful and help the clients with their goals, I think would be really
Training
great.
materials for
Yeah.
case management. We're getting tired.
Day 2.
Any yeah, go ahead.
I think collaboration between programs, and it could be across the country, it could be within a province, but just kind of exchanging notes, I guess, in a sense, because I run a very small program, but it's like I don't know what someone in Moncton's doing. I don't know what someone in Fredericton's doing. It'd be nice to know, what might work for them, what could work for us, and that sort of thing. So just collaboration, I guess, between agencies and programs.
Yeah, more exchange or sort of network support amongst people who are doing things like a housing first case management program, like having something like that.
And I think that was one of the outcomes of the Fidelity Exchange, that Catherine's left, but she talked about how she has continued the collaboration with CMHA Toronto.
Is that right?
Yeah, yeah. They've continued. They keep in touch. They exchange, kind of ideas and information and so on. So
What was nice about that Fidelity Exchange is they got to go to. I mean, it speaks a little bit against the virtual part, maybe, but maybe not.
Yeah.
But getting to see the other program, you kind of have a kindred spirit because you're both doing housing first. So and you make the personal contacts.
And I guess it's kind of related, but it struck me in our session earlier, and it's kind of what you're saying, which I think is an important point. People who it's hard work. I mean, operating housing first programs, it's so demanding. people are interested in innovations, kind of new ideas, and they're out there. So I just wonder how we collect those. And I mean, I guess we could do a webinar on that too,
On innovation.
Yeah, because the fidelity stuff, those standards only take you so far. And those set of standards probably in 5 years will change because things they keep morphing, they keep changing and so on. So, but it's kind of trying to find the innovations and get them out to the field. So just a thought.
10 minutes. Yeah, we've got a few minutes left. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, sorry.
We also have one more question. Oh, we have one more question too, Jen.
Just along those same lines, I'm just curious about a cross country like network of practice where we could get together online and share what we're doing and um, tips and tricks that might help somebody else that's not, maybe don't have the same tools that we have. We could share those tools, or we could share documents and that type of thing, but we could get together virtually.
Yeah, that fits with what you were saying. It's a practice network, right? Community of interest. That sounds like a really good idea. We have one other question, and that's what would you like to contribute? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I'm answering your next question.
Hey,
I'm offering
thank
something
you,
to
thank
you.
you.
You mentioned it. I'm offering crystal meth expertise. That's
Okay.
what I came to present on at the conference. My chat hasn't stopped pinging with requests for trainings.
Okay.
So I'm offering the same
Well,
to you and people you're connected with. I specialize in working with unhoused individuals who use crystal meth are deemed unhousable. And we're running a pilot that's proving otherwise. All of our house folks have been housed for more than 6 months now. No reincarcerations, no rehospitalizations. It's just because we changed the way we offer our case management services in the community.
That is great.
And I'm doing the research piece as well, which I'll share with you.
Thank you and congratulations on all those pings. Okay, but you come to us first. And then because we can make like a webinar.
I just want to increase the reach in terms of
so
knowledge
we could
sharing.
we could help you do that. Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. Who else is going to help? Beat that.
Well, it's sort of in the same lines, actually. I was the addiction specialist on the team in Moncton. I've got lived experience. That is my life. That's where I come from.
Great.
Plus, I've got 27 years in mental health and addictions stuff. So I'm more than happy to share.
Thank you.
The addiction piece. Crystal meth is one, but just what addiction is psychologically, physically, neurologically. I mean, I can explain it from A to Z. So
yeah,
definitely willing to share that.
Thank you.
And a former professional boxer. So
I remember.
So nobody messes with JP.
Yeah, exactly. Don't get on his bad side. Anyone else?
That sounds like a great webinar. Let me know when it is, guys.
Just the community of practice, is something. I just wonder, have any of you participated? I thought CAEH had one at one point, but maybe not. Yeah, and I thought that was when they had Samson Barris was helping with. That's one we probably want to take a look at, because it's hard. It's such hard work, and this is how you can connect. And again, this virtual world opens up possibilities. So
I believe Built for Zero does their community of practice calls as well. And I feel like some of those have been opened up recently as well to other communities.
I think if there's any last thoughts about anything.
Your last thoughts? We really appreciate your participation today, comments.
Hang on
Microphone.
one second.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, well, we appreciate you coming today, sharing your experiences and ideas. And if there's any last thoughts, will anyone want to share anything before we go?
I will say though, if anybody's wants to get on our our emailing list, either business card or just take your name and uh, and email, and you won't get a deluge of emails. I promise you. So kind of just come up and give me that. Thank you.
I was just going to say, let's give these guys a round of applause. Thanks so much, everyone, for attending this session, and to our wonderful presenters for bringing everyone together on such an engaging session. Thanks so much.